The Galactic Council chamber was vast, its ceiling lost in a haze of luminous gas that rippled like auroras. Delegates of 24 ancient civilizations sat in elevated tiers, their eyes, or equivalents, fixed on the central dais. A holographic display hung above it, showing Earth's solar system as a fragile scatter of dots. High Strategos Vaynar rose, his elongated frame draped in the crimson sash of Concord Command. His scaled face betrayed neither emotion nor doubt as he addressed the chamber. Within 6 hours, human resistance will collapse. Their fleet lacks the numbers, the discipline, the doctrine. Probability of survival beyond that window, less than 1%. Murmurs of satisfaction circled the hall. The Concord was accustomed to order, predictability, inevitability. Wars were calculations, tonnage, formations, energy reserves, all neatly reducible to outcomes. Humanity had defied the Council's ultimatum, and so the equation would be resolved in fire. A delegate from the Thrix leaned forward, tendrils flexing. 6 hours is generous, Strategos. Why so long? Vaynar's thin mouth curved in something like a smile. I allow for their chaos. They will flail, as primitives do. It may take time for the illusion of resistance to collapse. The Council accepted this with quiet nods. The verdict was passed. Humanity would be erased before a single Concord day ended. On the far side of the galaxy, Captain Elena Ramirez leaned on the railing of the Resolute's bridge and stared at the same data projection. Concord fleets, hundreds strong, bore down on Earth's scattered defenses. She traced the enemy's movement with a finger, her lips tightening. 6 hours. That was the estimate transmitted across half the galaxy by beings who had ruled space since before her species had kindled fire. She almost laughed. They think we'll last that long? She muttered. Commander Ishan Patel, her tactical officer, glanced over. Not sure if that's optimism or arrogance. Both, Ramirez said. Her dark eyes stayed on the display. Either way, they're wrong. The bridge crew waited for her to issue orders, their faces a mix of fear and determination. Everyone knew the numbers: 38 human warships against nearly 700 Concord vessels. On paper, the outcome wasn't just defeat, it was annihilation. Patel cleared his throat. Captain, with respect, if we adopt defensive posture around Mars, we can delay them. Maybe force negotiations. No, Ramirez cut in. Her voice was low but edged with steel. If we fight on their terms, we're dead. Negotiations don't matter if there's nobody left alive to hold them. Lieutenant Carter, barely 24 and fresh from the academy, spoke up hesitantly. Then what's the plan, ma'am? Ramirez straightened, her voice rising for all to hear. The Concord believes wars are won by formula. By numbers. By centuries of tradition. But we're not here to play their game. We're here to flip the table. She stepped into the center of the bridge, eyes sweeping over every face. We won't fight for 6 hours. We'll finish this war in 6 minutes. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Then Patel spoke, cautious but steady. Captain, you're serious. Dead serious. A faint grin tugged at her mouth. And if we're not, we'll just be dead. Preparations began at once. The Resolute's hangar bays filled with swarms of jury-rigged drones, each one carrying cheap emitters broadcasting false signatures. Engineers loaded fuel tankers with unstable reactor cores, their mission clear: ram and detonate. Communications officers uploaded files of ancient war songs, distorted screams, and coded nonsense into broad-spectrum transmitters. Chaos itself would be weaponized. Ramirez walked through the decks as her crew worked. She felt their fear, but also their trust. They were Terrans, used to fighting uphill battles, surviving in places no sane species dared to live. That was their edge: unpredictability, recklessness, imagination sharpened by desperation. She paused beside Carter, who was aligning a drone's emitter. His hands shook. Lieutenant, she said quietly, you're afraid. Yes, ma'am, he admitted, his voice breaking. If we fail. We won't, Ramirez interrupted. And do you know why? He shook his head. Because they can't imagine us. They think we'll fight clean, logical, honorable. We don't. We fight dirty. We fight to win. And today, we teach the galaxy what that means. Carter swallowed, nodded, and returned to his work with steadier hands. Hours later, the fleet assembled beyond Earth's orbit. 38 warships, engines burning cold, weapons primed. Against them, the Concorde Armada swept forward like a tide, ships aligned in symmetrical wedges, banners glowing across their hulls. To alien eyes, it was a display of majesty. To humans, it was a perfect target. On the bridge, the countdown ticked. Enemy range, 15 minutes. 10. 5. Patel whispered. This is madness. Exactly, Ramirez replied. That's why it'll work. When the Concorde fleet crossed into range, Ramirez gave a single nod. Initiate disruption. At once space filled with noise. Human transmitters blasted waves of distortion into enemy comms. Drones scattered, each projecting false signals. Hundreds of phantom warships flickered across Concorde sensors. Ancient war songs, full of pounding drums and guttural chants, roared through the void. To human ears, it was exhilarating. To aliens raised in millennia of ordered silence, it was unbearable. In the council chamber light years away, delegates leaned forward, confused. The feed was garbled with static, images breaking into flickering chaos. What is this? One demanded. What are they doing? Vaynar's scaled jaw tightened. Irrelevant distractions. Their tricks will not alter the outcome. But a trace of uncertainty flickered in his eyes. Back aboard the Resolute, Ramirez watched enemy formations falter. Ships slowed, realigned, unsure of which signals to trust. The Concorde's perfect geometry fractured as captains argued across clogged channels. Patel's eyes widened. It's working. They don't know where we are. Good, Ramirez said. Her voice was calm, almost cold. Now we strike. She turned to her crew, every syllable deliberate. Remember this, we don't give them hours. We give them 6 minutes. Make every second count. As the alien armada loomed closer, the bridge vibrated with tension. Orders flew, systems lit up, and for a heartbeat, time seemed to hold its breath. Ramirez leaned forward, eyes fixed on the vast enemy fleet. They thought we'd break. Instead, we're going to break them. The first salvo lit space in white fire. The first salvo tore across the void. Brilliant lances of energy raked through phantom targets, drones flaring and dissolving into molten fragments. To Concorde captains, it looked like dozens of Terran ships destroyed in an instant. But their triumph faltered as the images stuttered and reappeared, multiplied, dancing out of formation. They're illusions, one alien commander barked, his mandibles clattering in agitation. Which ones are real? On the Resolute, Ramirez's mouth curved in a cold smile. Make them guess until it kills them. The second wave of fire shredded more decoys. Amid the confusion, the Resolute's railgun roared, a thunderous vibration that shook the entire hull. A streak of superheated tungsten crossed space in seconds, punching clean through the shield of a Concorde dreadnought. The alien vessel shuddered, vented plasma, then erupted into a ball of flame and debris. Gasps filled the council chamber, as the feed relayed the impossible. One human shot had ended a ship that should have been untouchable. Delegates hissed and chittered in disbelief. Statistical outlier. Vaynar snapped, though his claws tightened against the railing. Continue bombardment. Back on the bridge, Patel's eyes gleamed. Direct hit. They didn't even see it coming. Ramirez didn't smile. They won't forget either. Keep moving. Never let them pin us. The fleet scattered into ragged, unpredictable vectors. Human ships darted at odd angles, cutting thrust suddenly, then reigniting engines at full burn. Concorde formations, trained for centuries in symmetry and measured advance, began to crack. Lieutenant Carter called out, exhilarated. They're overshooting. They can't track our movement. Good, Ramirez said. Her gaze was sharp, unyielding. Then let's make it worse. She issued the next order. Tanker ships, stripped of crews and rigged for overload, surged forward. Concord scanners flagged them late, dismissing the ungainly craft as no threat, until the first slammed into a cruiser's flank. The explosion tore through 3 ships at once, a miniature sun blooming in the void. Blinding light seared across every sensor. Alien fleets staggered, blinded. Vaynar snapped commands, his voice edged with disbelief. "Realign! Do not break formation!" But his captains could barely hear through the flood of interference. Human voices shouting, laughing, screaming across every frequency. To disciplined ears, it was madness. "Do you hear it?" a junior aide whispered in horror as distorted war songs thundered over the comms. "They sound like they enjoy this." Vaynar silenced him with a glare, but unease crept through the chamber. Back in human space, the Resolute cut into the flank of another Concorde wing. A pair of frigates darted ahead, sacrificing themselves to draw fire while heavier cruisers swung behind, unleashing concentrated missile salvos into exposed engines. Alien shields flared, collapsed, and vessels spun lifeless. "2 more down!" Carter shouted. "Mark the clock," Ramirez said. "How long since engagement?" 3 minutes 12 seconds, Patel answered. "Halfway there," Ramirez murmured. Alien captains, bred to anticipate hours of orderly maneuver, now found themselves drowning in unpredictability. Concorde doctrine relied on preserving command ships, but Ramirez had made them priority targets. Another human railgun slug smashed through a flagship's bridge tower, and the networked coordination faltered. Panic spread. Without centralized control, captains acted alone, firing wildly into space that seemed full of phantoms. Drones flared, died, multiplied again. Human ships weaved through the chaos, striking like knives into soft flesh. In the council chamber, a delegate slammed a clawed hand against the railing. "This is impossible! No primitive fleet can annihilate our formations so swiftly!" But impossible streamed live before their eyes. Vaynar's own breath came harsh through clenched jaws. He had seen countless wars, but none fought like this. It was as if the humans had thrown aside every rule of combat itself. "They fight with no pattern," he muttered. "Like fire, spreading where it wills." On the Resolute, alarms blared as an enemy beam grazed the hull, searing plating. The ship shuddered. Crew braced, recovered, pressed on. Ramirez's voice cut through the noise. "Damage report? Minor breaches sealed. Weapons at 90%, Patel replied. "Then stay on the hunt. Their leaders are breaking. Finish the job." Her command carried no doubt, no hesitation. The crew's fear hardened into determination. They believed, not in survival, but in victory. The 4th minute passed. Another tanker ignited, creating a shockwave that scattered dozens of alien craft. 5th minute, EMP bursts detonated, frying Concorde shield systems. Human torpedoes sliced through unguarded hulls, one after another. Carter's voice rose, trembling with disbelief. "They're falling apart. Whole wings are retreating." Patel's eyes darted to the chrono. 5 minutes 40 seconds. "Then let's end it before 6, Ramirez ordered. "Target Vaynar's flagship." The Resolute and 2 escorts turned their guns on the command vessel, a leviathan at the center of the fray. Shields rippled under concentrated fire, then collapsed in a flare of light. Railguns spat tungsten into its armored core. The alien behemoth groaned, fractured, and died in silence. The 6th minute arrived. The battle was over. Space was littered with Concorde wreckage, burning fragments tumbling like shattered jewels. Survivors fled in disarray, their formations gone, their command destroyed. Human ships floated battered but alive, engines glowing against the darkness. On the bridge, the crew sat stunned in silence, the weight of what they had done settling over them. Breathless, Carter whispered, We won." Ramirez finally allowed herself a grim smile. "No. We ended it." She turned to Patel. "Time? 6 minutes 2 seconds, he said softly. "Close enough," Ramirez replied. She let out a long breath. "Send the signal." The war is finished. Across the galaxy, the council chamber was hushed, the arrogance of its delegates silenced by the evidence before them. Vaynar's image flickered on the central display, his face pale beneath the scales. Humans are, he began, voice breaking. Impossible. And then the feed cut to black. The battlefield was silent now, save for the soft ping of cooling metal and the faint crackle of damaged comms. Space beyond Earth's orbit was strewn with debris, fractured hulls, scorched plating, and drifting fragments of what had once been the most formidable fleet in the galaxy. On the bridge of the Resolute, the crews sat in stunned stillness. The adrenaline that had carried them through 6 minutes of chaos ebbed, leaving exhaustion in its wake. Lieutenant Carter broke the silence first. His voice was hoarse, almost reverent. It's over. Ramirez stood at the viewport, hands clasped behind her back, her posture steady though her shoulders felt carved from stone. Yes, she said. It's over, for us. For them, it's just beginning. Patel turned in his chair, his face pale with disbelief. Captain, I don't understand. We destroyed them, yes, but the Concorde still has hundreds of fleets. This was only one armada. Ramirez nodded slowly. True. But this wasn't about ships or numbers. It was about fear. They believed we'd collapse in hours. Instead, we turned their certainty into ashes in minutes. That story will echo louder than any surviving ship. Carter's brow furrowed. Do you think they'll come back? Ramirez finally looked away from the viewport. Her eyes were dark, unwavering. Of course they will. But they'll never come back the same way. From now on, every captain, every strategist in the Concorde will remember today, and hesitate. Light years away, in the council chamber, the impact of that hesitation was already being felt. Delegates who had once lounged in smug certainty now leaned forward in frantic debate. The chamber was a riot of voices, clicks, growls, and hisses. This is a fabrication, one species cried, appendages thrashing. A staged feed. But the data streams were irrefutable. Sensor records, crew logs, and distress signals from dozens of alien ships confirmed the same impossible truth. A Terran fleet had annihilated a force 20 times its size in under 10 minutes. High Strategos Vaynar appeared on the central projection, battered and humiliated. His flagship's command chamber had been evacuated to an emergency craft, his sash torn, scales dull. His voice carried none of its former confidence. They do not fight as we do, he said, each word bitter as acid. They do not fight as anyone does. Their logic is not our logic. Their weakness is not weakness. Against them, probability means nothing. Humans are impossible. The chamber fell silent. Delegates who had scorned humanity now stared at one another with unease. For the first time in centuries, the council tasted fear. Back aboard the Resolute, damaged crews reported status. Fires were out. Hull breaches sealed. Weapons depleted but intact. Casualty reports scrolled across screens. Losses had been heavy, but not crippling. By all calculations, humanity should have been erased. Instead, they had endured. Ramirez allowed herself a rare moment to sit. Her body ached from tension, every muscle tight, but she forced herself to remain sharp. A leader could not falter while others still looked to her. Patel approached quietly. Captain, we've received a transmission request from Earth Command. They want a statement for the record. Ramirez exhaled slowly. She knew this would be broadcast not just to Earth, but through intercepted Concorde channels, to every corner of the galaxy. She rose again, smoothed her uniform, and faced the recorder. People of Earth. Today the Concorde predicted our annihilation. They gave us 6 hours to live. We gave them 6 minutes to remember. Her voice was calm, even, but it carried a weight that pressed into the room. Crew members froze, listening. They thought we would fight like them, methodical, predictable, bound by rules written long before we left our first star. But we are not them. We are human. We fight with every ounce of desperation, imagination, and fury that survival demands. And we proved that no calculation, no tradition, no empire can measure that. She paused, letting the words settle before continuing. We are not the oldest species. We are not the strongest. But today the galaxy has learned that we are the most dangerous to underestimate. We will not kneel. We will not fade. We will fight, and if we must, we will end wars before they begin. The transmission cut. Silence followed, heavy and absolute. Then, one by one, the bridge crew erupted into quiet applause, not jubilation, not celebration, but respect for words that felt like history itself. Later, as the ship drifted among the wreckage, Ramirez stood alone by the viewport again. Patel joined her, his expression softer now. You think they'll leave us alone? He asked. No, she said. But next time, they won't come with certainty. They'll come with caution. And that gives us a chance. Patel gave a wry smile. You really did it. You ended a war in minutes. Ramirez's lips curved faintly. No, Commander. We did. On distant worlds, whispers spread faster than light. Colonists on forgotten outposts, smugglers in shadowed ports, even enslaved species under Concord rule, all heard the same story. Humanity, outnumbered and outgunned, had defied the Empire and won. For them, the victory was more than survival. It was proof that the mighty Concord could bleed. In council records, the war was filed as a skirmish. Official accounts tried to downplay the scale, but the truth had already escaped. Soldiers who had fled spoke of phantom fleets, of humans laughing in the storm of battle, of a flagship destroyed in minutes. And in every retelling, the same phrase appeared, whispered in awe and dread: humans are impossible. Back on the Resolute, the crew finally allowed themselves to rest. Lights dimmed, corridors quieted. But Ramirez remained awake, reviewing damage reports, replaying fragments of the battle, calculating what might come next. She knew this victory was not an end, but a beginning. Her reflection stared back at her from the viewport, tired, resolute, unyielding. We've shown them who we are, she whispered to herself. Now they'll never forget. As Earth turned below, blue and fragile against the void, the fleet stood watch. No longer the weakest species in the galaxy. No longer the prey. Humanity had announced itself to the stars in fire and chaos. And the galaxy, for the first time in millennia, was afraid.